Welcome to Vintage Horror, where the darkness comes alive. Before we begin, tell us, where are you watching from? What time is it in your world right now? And most importantly, how does this tale make you feel? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and brace yourself for a chilling journey into the unknown.
3 in the tub. The air in Boston carried a sharp, briny bite as I hauled the last cardboard box up the narrow stairwell of 47 Hancock Street. My boots thudding against the worn wooden steps, each one groaning under my weight with a creak that echoed in the tight shadowed space. It was late afternoon. Gray light filtering through a grimy skylight overhead, casting faint mottled patterns across the peeling paint of the walls, flakes of old beige curling away like dead skin to reveal the dull brown beneath. My breath puffed out in short, visible bursts, the chill of early autumn seeping through the thin jacket I had thrown on, its zipper snagging on my shirt as I shifted the box's weight, the corners digging into my palms, leaving red welts that stung with every jostle. The building was old, pre-war, the realtor had said, a sagging relic of red brick and warped windows tucked into a quiet corner of the south end, affordable enough for a broke graphic designer like me, Alex Carver, starting over after a string of freelance gigs dried up. The stairwell smelled of damp plaster and something faintly sour, mildew maybe, or the ghost of spilled beer from decades past, clinging to the air like a stubborn fog that coated my throat with every inhale. My arms ached as I reached the third floor, the box slipping slightly in my sweaty grip, and I fumbled with the keys, brass, scratched, heavy on a cheap plastic fob, until the lock to apartment 3B clicked open, the door swinging inward with a slow, reluctant groan, hinges squealing as if rusted stiff. I stepped inside, the hardwood floor creaking beneath my boots, a low, mournful sound that rippled through the empty space and dropped the box beside the others, 5 in all, stacked haphazardly near the door, their edges taped shut with curling strips of duct tape, labeled in black marker, books, clothes, kitchen, misc. The apartment was small, a one-bedroom with a living area barely big enough for the thrift store couch I'd dragged in yesterday, its faded green upholstery sagging under a thin layer of dust that puffed up when I'd sat on it, tickling my nose with a dry, musty scent. The walls were a dull off-white, streaked with faint cracks that spider-webbed from the corners, and a single window faced the alley, narrow, its glass warped and smudged, rattling faintly in its frame as a gust of wind slipped through the cracks, carrying the distant honk of traffic and a briny whiff of the harbor a mile off. I wiped my hands on my jeans, gritty with dirt from the move, and took a slow turn, the floorboards creaking under each step, their warped edges catching the dim light from a bare bulb overhead, its chains swaying slightly, clinking against itself in the stillness. The kitchenette sat off to the right, a cramped nook with a chipped formica counter, a sink stained rust brown at the edges, and a stove that looked like it hadn't been cleaned since the Nixon era, grease spots dotting its burners in dark, sticky patches. A fridge hummed faintly in the corner, its white enamel yellowed with age, the handle loose and wobbling when I tugged it open, the interior empty, but for a faint whiff of sour milk that lingered from some past tenant. I shut it quick, the door thudding soft, and moved past to the bedroom, a tight square with a single window, its blinds bent and tangled, letting slivers of gray light spill across the bare mattress I tossed in last night, its springs as I'd shifted under the thin blanket, chasing sleep that wouldn't come. The bathroom was last. Down a short hall, the door ajar, its hinges loose, swaying faintly, as if nudged by an unseen draft. I pushed it open, the wood scraping against the frame with a low, grating sound, and stepped inside. The tiles beneath my boots cracked and uneven, their once white grout blackened with age, curling up at the edges like shriveled veins. The sink was small, porcelain chipped at the rim, a faint rust stain blooming around the drain, and a mirror hung above it, spotted with age, its edges fogged, reflecting my face in a distorted blur, pale, unshaven, eyes shadowed from too many late nights. The tub dominated the space, clawfoot, cast iron, its enamel dulled to a sickly gray, streaked with faint scratches and a ring of discoloration near the drain, a testament to years of use or neglect. I ran a hand along its edge, cold, smooth, the metal biting into my skin, and frowned, a faint unease prickling my gut, though I couldn't place why. I unpacked slow, books onto a wobbly shelf I'd hauled up, clothes into a dresser with drawers that stuck, kitchen stuff onto the counter, the clatter of pots and plates sharp against the quiet. The light faded outside, the alley window darkening to a deep slate, the wind picking up, rattling the panes with a low, insistent whine that seeped into the walls, a sound that burrowed into my skull. I cooked ramen on the stove, grease popping, steam rising in thin wisps that fogged the air, and ate standing at the counter, the noodles bland and slippery, the broth lukewarm by the time I finished, the bowl clinking soft as I set it in the sink, water dripping from the faucet in a slow, steady plip, plip, plip that echoed in the emptiness. Night fell hard. Boston streetlights buzzing faintly beyond the window, their yellow glow seeping through the blinds in thin, fractured lines that danced across the floor. I sank onto the couch, the springs groaning under me, and scrolled my phone, texts from friends unanswered, job listings sparse, until my eyes drooped, the screen blurring, the hum of the fridge a distant lullaby. I dragged myself to the bedroom, kicking off my boots. They thudded against the hardwood, laces tangling, and collapsed onto the mattress, the springs squeaking loud, the blanket thin and scratchy against my skin, the room cold despite the radiator's faint hiss in the corner. Sleep came slow, fitful, shallow, my mind buzzing with the day's labor, the apartment's creaks blending into a restless drone, floorboards settling, wind rattling, the plip, plip of the sink, a steady heartbeat. Then, a whisper, faint, soft, like breath against glass, slipping through the dark from somewhere beyond the bedroom door. My eyes snapped open, heart thudding, the room pitch black, but for the slivers of streetlight cutting through the blinds, casting jagged shadows across the walls. I held my breath, ears straining, nothing, just the wind, the drip, until it came again. A low murmur, fragmented, unintelligible, curling from the hall like smoke, thin and cold. I sat up, the mattress creaking loud, springs digging into my back, and fumbled for my phone. Its screen glowing harsh, 2:17 a.m., the light trembling in my grip, as I swung my legs over the edge, bare feet hitting the hardwood, icy and rough against my soles. The whisper faded, silence pressing in, thick and heavy, but my pulse raced, a frantic thud that echoed in my skull, urging me up, out, toward the sound. The hall was a tunnel, dark, narrow, the bathroom door still ajar, swaying faintly, its hinges clinking soft in the draft that brushed my ankles, a chill that sank into my bones, sharper than the night should have allowed. I stopped at the threshold, Phone raised, its flashlight beam cutting through the gloom, tiles glinting, sink shadowed, the tub looming large, its claw feet stark against the floor, the enamel dull and gray in the light. The air shifted, cold, sudden, a draft that prickled my arms, my breath fogging faint in the beam, a plume that swirled and dissipated, quick and unnatural. The whisper came again, soft, insistent from the tub, a low, breathy hiss. The cut off, incomplete, like a word caught mid-throat, echoing faintly off the iron walls. I stepped closer, the tiles creaking underfoot, my beam trembling on the tub's edge. Empty, dry, the drain of black holes staring back, and the sound stopped. Silence, slamming down, heavy and absolute, the cold lifting as quick as it came. I backed out, slow, deliberate, phone shaking, the hall swallowing me as I retreated to the bedroom, the mattress creaking as I sank back, pulling the blanket tight, my eyes locked on the door, ajar now, swaying faintly in the dark. The whisper didn't return, not that night, but my neck prickled, a faint itch I couldn't shake, and the plip, plip, plip from the sink stretched on. A rhythm that wouldn't let me sleep, a sound that wasn't just water, not anymore. Morning crept into apartment 3B, slow and gray, a dull, watery light seeping through the bedroom blinds, their bent slats casting jagged shadows across the bare mattress where I'd barely slept. The whisper from the bathroom, soft, fleeting, that half-formed thud from the tub had lodged in my skull like a splinter, sharp and persistent, replaying through the restless hours until dawn broke. Plip, plip, plip of the kitchen faucet, a relentless counterpoint that kept my eyes open, staring at the ceiling's cracked plaster, its fissures spreading like veins in the dimness. My neck still itched, a faint nagging prickle that hadn't faded since I'd backed out of the bathroom at 2:17 a.m. And my skin felt clammy, the thin blanket tangled around my legs, damp with sweat, despite the chill that clung to the room, a cold that shouldn't have lingered in the radiator's faint, hissing warmth. I rolled off the mattress, springs squeaking loud, a harsh, grating sound that jolted the silence, my bare feet hitting the hardwood, icy and rough against my soles, the grain gritty with dust that stuck to my skin. My boots sat by the door, laces snarled from last night's kickoff, and I tugged them on, the leather stiff and cold, creaking as I laced them tight, the weight grounding me as I shuffled to the kitchenette, the floorboards groaning under each step, a low, mournful chorus that echoed in the empty space. The fridge hummed, faint, unsteady, its handle loose as I yanked it open, the hinges squealing, a blast of cool air hitting my face, tinged with that sour milk whiff I couldn't scrub out. I grabbed a carton of orange juice, half empty, pulp swirling in the dim light, and poured it into a chipped glass, the liquid sloshing loud, a sharp tang rising as I gulped it down, the acidity biting my throat, waking me just enough to shake the haze. The apartment felt off, quieter than it should have, the usual city hum of Boston muted beyond the alley window, its warped glass rattling faintly as a gust of wind slipped through the cracks, carrying a brainy whiff of the harbor and the distant clang of a dumpster lid slamming shut. I set the glass in the sink, clink, the faucet's drip resuming, plip, 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 a rhythm that gnawed at my nerves, too steady, too alive. My phone buzzed on the counter, screen scratched, glowing 7:43 a.m. A text from my buddy Sam. "How's the new dump?" I typed back, fingers sluggish, creaky, cheap, fine, and dropped it, the plastic clattering soft. my eyes drifting to the bathroom door, down the hall, still ajar, swaying faintly in a draft I couldn't feel from here, its hinges clinking like a faint metallic heartbeat. I couldn't ignore it, not after last night. So I grabbed my phone again, its weight cold in my palm, and headed down the hall, the hardwood creaking louder with each step, the air cooling as I neared a subtle shift that prickled my arms, my breath fogging faintly in the dimness, though the radiator hissed steady behind me. The bathroom door swung wider as I approached, slow, unbidden, the wood scraping against the frame with a low grating whine that sank into my bones, the tiles beyond glinting dull in the gray light spilling from the bedroom. I stopped at the threshold, phone raised, its flashlight beam cutting through the gloom, sharp, white, sweeping across the cracked tiles, their blackened grout curling up like shriveled roots, the sinks, rust-stained porcelain, the mirrors, fogged edges reflecting my face in a warped smear, pale, unshaven, eyes shadowed with doubt. The tub loomed, clawfoot, cast iron, its enamel dulled to a sickly gray, scratches crisscrossing its surface like faint scars that drain a black pit that seemed to swallow the light. I stepped inside, the tiles creaking under my boots, a faint snap that echoed off the walls. The air plunging cold, sharper now, a bite that sank into my skin, my breath fogging thick, swirling in the beam like smoke caught mid-drift. I aimed the light at the tub, empty, dry, the metal cold to the touch as I brushed my fingers along its edge, a chill that numbed my fingertips, lingering even as I pulled back, wiping my hand on my jeans, the denim gritty against my palm. The whisper came then, soft, breathy, from the tub's depths. The cut off, incomplete, a hiss that curled around my ears, faint but close, like someone exhaling an inch from my neck. I froze, heart thudding, a heavy thud that echoed in my chest, phone trembling, the beam jittering across the tub's curves, catching faint glints on the scratches, the air thickening with that cold, my breath fogging faster, a plume that danced and dissipated in the light. "Hello?" I rasped, voice thin, cracking, the word lost in the tile's echo, and the whisper answered, louder, clearer. 3, a single breathy syllable that hung in the air, dry and brittle, not one voice, but a layered murmur, overlapping, fragmented, like multiple throats speaking at once, each tone slightly off, a chorus of shadows I couldn't place. My stomach lurched, a cold, nauseous twist, and I stepped back, boot catching a tile's edge, a sharp scrape, the beam swinging wild, the tub blurring in the light, empty still, but the cold deepened, a weight that pressed my lungs, my neck prickling sharp, a needle under my skin. I aimed the phone lower, closer, the drain glinting wet now, though it had been dry seconds ago, a single bead of water trembling at its edge, catching the beam in a tiny prism-like flash before slipping down, vanishing into the black. The whisper shifted. 3, softer, insistent, curling from the drain itself. A hiss that vibrated through the iron. The tub's claw feet stark against the tiles, their shadows stretching long and thin, twitching faintly as if alive. My chest tightened, breath short, ragged, the beam trembling harder, my free hand gripping the sink's edge, porcelain cold and slick under my fingers, grounding me as the cold spot pulsed, stronger, sharper, swirling around my legs, a draft that tugged at my jeans, icy tendrils brushing my ankles like fingers testing my skin. "Who's there?" I snapped, louder, voice bouncing off the walls, a hollow echo that died fast, and the whisper stopped. Silence slamming down. Heavy. Absolute. The cold lifting as quick as it came. The air warming. My breath no longer fogging. The tub still and dry again. The drain a dull black hole staring back. I backed out. Slow. Deliberate. Phone shaking. The hall swallowing me as I retreated to the kitchen. Boots thudding loud. The floorboards groaning. A protest that followed me back. I sank onto the couch. Springs creaking. Dust puffing up. A dry whiff that tickled my nose, and stared at the bathroom door, ajar still, swaying faintly, its hinges clinking soft in the quiet. The blip, blip, blip from the sink, a steady pulse that wouldn't let me settle. The day dragged, gray light fading to a bruised dusk, the alley window rattling harder as the wind picked up, a low whine that seeped into the walls, burrowing into my skull. I tried to work, laptop open, freelance portfolio half edited, but my eyes darted to the hall. The tub's whisper, 3, looping in my head, a sound I couldn't unhear, a weight I couldn't shake. I stood, restless, pacing, the hardwood creaking under my boots, each step a thud that echoed in the stillness, my shadow stretching long across the walls, flickering in the dim light from the bare bulb overhead, its chain swaying, clinking soft, a rhythm that matched the drip, the wind, the unease coiling tight in my gut. Dusk deepened, street lights buzzing beyond the window, their yellow glow seeping through the blinds in fractured lines. And I grabbed a beer from the fridge, the can cold and slick, condensation beating under my fingers as I cracked it open, the sharp hiss loud in the quiet, foam bubbling over the rim, a faint whiff of hops cutting through the apartment's musty air. I sipped, bitter, sharp, standing at the counter, eyes locked on the bathroom door, the whispers echo. 3. A murmur I felt in my bones, a call I couldn't answer. The cold came again, subtle, creeping, a draft that brushed my neck, my arms, my breath fogging faint in the dimness, though the radiator hissed steady behind me, its warmth a lie against the chill, sinking into my skin. I set the can down, clink, the sound sharp, and stepped toward the hall, boots slow, deliberate, the floorboards creaking louder, the air cooling with each step, my phone in hand, its flashlight off but ready, its weight a cold anchor in my palm. The bathroom door swayed, wider now, the tiles glinting dull, the tub shadows stretching long, its claw feet stark against the floor, and the whisper returned. 3, louder, layered, a chorus of breaths that curled from the drain, the cold pulsing sharp, my breath fogging thick, a plume that danced in the gray light, spilling from the bedroom. I stopped, heart slamming, neck prickling, a bead of sweat trickling down my spine, cold against my shirt, and the tub stared back, empty, dry, but alive, its whisper a promise I couldn't ignore, a sound that wouldn't let me rest. The gray of Tuesday morning seeped into apartment 3B like spilled ink, a dull, oppressive light that filtered through the alley window's warped glass, casting faint, wavering shadows across the living room's cracked walls. I barely slept again. The whisper from the tub, that layered 3, echoing in a chorus of breaths, had burrowed into my skull, a relentless hum that kept me awake, staring at the bedroom ceiling, its plaster fissures glowing faintly in the streetlight's fractured glow. My eyes burned, red-rimmed, gritty, each blink a scrape of exhaustion that stung deep, and my neck prickled still, a sharp, insistent itch that flared every time I passed the bathroom door, ajar, as always, swaying faintly in a draft that shouldn't have been there, its hinges clinking soft like a distant bell tolling in the dark. I rolled off the mattress, springs groaning loud, a harsh creak that jolted the silence. My bare feet hitting the hardwood, cold and rough. The grain gritty with dust that clung to my soles. A faint chill seeping up my legs, despite the radiator's steady hiss in the corner. My boots waited by the door, laces tangled from last night's restless pacing, and I tugged them on, the leather stiff and damp, creaking as I laced them tight, the weight a faint anchor against the unease coiling tight in my gut. The kitchenette smelled of stale beer and yesterday's ramen, grease spots dotting the stove, the sink's rust-stained basin glinting dull in the dimness, and I grabbed a granola bar from a box on the counter, its wrapper crinkling loud as I tore it open, the dry oats crumbling against my tongue, a bland crunch that did little to settle my stomach's nervous twist. The apartment was too quiet. Boston's usual hum muted beyond the window. The wind, a low, mournful whine that slipped through the cracks, rattling the panes with a faint, insistent clatter, carrying a briny whiff of the harbor and the distant clang of a trash truck rumbling down Hancock Street. I sank onto the couch, springs creaking, dust puffing up in a dry cloud that tickled my nose, and stared at the bathroom door, its shadow stretching long across the hardwood. The tub's whisper. 3. Looping in my head. A sound I couldn't unhear, a weight I couldn't shake. My phone buzzed on the counter, screen scratched, glowing 8:12 a.m. A text from Sam. Still alive in that dump? I typed back, barely, hearing shit, and dropped it, the plastic clattering soft, my eyes drifting to the hall, the cold spots echo, lingering in my bones. A chill I couldn't explain. I needed answers, something beyond whispers and drafts. So I stood, boots thudding against the floorboards, each step a groan that echoed in the stillness, and grabbed my jacket from the pile by the door, denim damp, the zipper snagging as I tugged it on, the fabric heavy against my shoulders. The stairwell waited outside, a narrow tunnel of peeling paint and sour mildew, the steps creaking loud under my weight, the air thick with a dampness that coated my throat as I descended to the first floor, my breath puffing faint in the chill, though the building's heat should have warmed it. Mrs. Delaney's door, 1A, sat at the bottom, its wood chipped and faded, a brass knocker dulled with age glinting faintly as I raised my fist and knocked. 3 sharp raps, loud against the quiet, the sound bouncing off the walls like a gunshot in a cave. The door creaked open, slow, reluctant, revealing Mrs. Delaney, a wiry old woman with gray hair pulled tight into a bun, her face creased with lines that deepened as she squinted up at me through thick glasses, her eyes sharp despite the haze of age. "What's it now?" she rasped, voice dry and cracked, her bony hand gripping the doorframe, nails yellowed and curling, a faint whiff of mothballs and stale coffee drifting from inside. "It's Alex. 3B, I said, voice rough, my throat tight. "Something's off up there. Whispers, cold spots. You know anything about that place?" Her squint tightened, lips thinning to a hard line, and she stepped back, gesturing me in, with a jerk of her head, the door groaning wider, hinges squealing as I crossed the threshold. Her apartment smelled of dust and old paper, shelves sagging with books and trinkets, a faded floral couch sinking under a quilt, a kettle hissing faint on a stove in the corner, steam curling up in thin wisps that fogged the air. She shuffled to a chair, wooden, creaking, her slippers scuffing the hardwood, and and sank into it, pointing me to the couch, its springs groaning loud as I sat, dust puffing up, a dry tickle in my throat. 3B, she muttered, voice low, eyes flicking to the ceiling as if she could see through it. Been empty a while. Cheap for a reason. You hearing things, you say? I nodded, slow, deliberate, my hands clenching in my lap, denim gritty under my palms. Whispers, 3 from the tub. Cold as hell, too. No reason for it. She went still, fingers tightening on the chair's arms, knuckles whitening, her glasses slipping down her nose as she leaned forward, voice dropping to a rasp. 1954, she said, sharp, final. That's when it happened. Up there, that bathroom. Family of 3, mother, 2 kids, little ones, 5 and 7. Margaret Cole, her name was, husband. Left her, debts piled up, snapped one night. Filled that tub, drowned them both, then herself. Water ran red, they said. Neighbors heard the screams. Too late by then. Cops found them all in there, tangled up, cold as stone. Landlord hushed it, sold it cheap, kept it quiet. But folks knew, always did. My stomach dropped. A cold, hollow plunge. Breath catching in my throat. The granola bar's crumbs turning to ash on my tongue. Drowned, I croaked, voice barely audible. The prickle on my neck flaring sharp. A needle under my skin. She nodded, slow, grim. Her eyes dark behind the glasses, reflecting the dim light from a lamp flickering in the corner. Tub's still there, same one. People move in, move out, say they hear him, feel him. Whispers, cold, shadows. 3 voices, always 3. You're not the first boy, won't be the last. Her words sank into me, heavy, cold. A history I hadn't signed up for, a weight I couldn't shed. She shuffled to a drawer, wood scraping, hinges squeaking, pulling out a yellowed envelope, its edges curling, stained with age, and slid it across the table, the paper rasping against the grain. Found this years back, cleaning out storage, she muttered, tapping it with a bony finger, nail clicking soft. I opened it, slow, trembling, the paper brittle under my touch, a newspaper clipping slipping free, dated July 17th, 1954. Boston Globe, ink faded but legible. Tragedy at Hancock Street. Mother, children found dead in apartment. Below, a grainy photo, black and white. 3 figures in the tub. Margaret Cole, her face slack, hair plastered wet. 2 small shapes beside her. Limbs tangled, water dark around them, a shadow blurring the edges, the drain a black hole staring out. My chest tightened, breath short, ragged, the clipping trembling in my grip, the whisper, 3, echoing in my skull, layered, real, theirs. I stood, fast, the couch creaking loud, shoving the clipping back, my boots thudding against the hardwood as I muttered, thanks, voice tight, the envelope crumpling in my hand. As I bolted for the door, Mrs. Delaney's rasp following me. Careful up there, boy. The words, a warning I couldn't unhear. The stairwell swallowed me, cold, damp, steps groaning under my weight, my breath fogging thick, the mildew smell choking my throat as I climbed, the clipping burning in my pocket, a weight that dragged my steps. I burst into 3B, door slamming, lock clicking, the apartment silent but alive, the bathroom door swaying wider, tiles glinting dull, the tub shadows stretching long across the hall, claw feet stark against the hardwood. I dropped onto the couch, springs groaning, dust puffing up, staring at the clipping, unfolded now, the photo's grainy faces staring back. Margaret, the kids, 3, my neck prickling sharp, the cold seeping in, a draft that brushed my arms, my breath fogging faint in the dimness, though the radiator hissed steady behind me. The whisper came, soft, insistent. 3 from the hall. Layered, breathy, curling from the tub like smoke. A chorus of voices I knew now, a call I couldn't deny. I stood, boots slow, deliberate, the floorboards creaking loud, my phone trembling in my hand, its flashlight off but ready. I had the tub waiting, its gray enamel glinting dull, the drain a black pit that whispered back, a history I couldn't outrun. Wednesday morning slunk into apartment 3B with a sluggish leaden gloom, the sky beyond the alley window, a bruised swirl of gray and purple, heavy clouds pressing down on Boston like a lid sealing a tomb. The newspaper clipping from Mrs. Delaney, Margaret Cole, and her 2 kids, drowned in that tub in 1954, sat unfolded on the kitchen counter, its grainy photo staring up at me, 3 slack faces tangled in dark water, the ink faded but sharp enough to claw at my skull. A weight I couldn't shake since yesterday's revelation. Sleep had dodged me again. My eyes were sunken pits, red-webbed and raw, each blink a scrape of grit that burned deep, my neck prickling sharp, a constant electric itch that flared every time I glanced at the bathroom door, ajar still, swaying faintly in a draft that carried the whisper. 3. A layered, breathy chorus that echoed through the night. Louder now, closer, a sound I couldn't unhear. I dragged myself off the mattress, springs creaking loud, a harsh groan that shattered the silence. My bare feet hitting the hardwood, icy and splintered, the grain rough with dust that stuck to my soles, a chill seeping up my legs, sharper than the radiator's faint, hissing warmth could counter. My boots waited by the bedroom door, laces snarled, leather damp from yesterday's pacing, and I tugged them on, the creak of the stiff material loud in the quiet, the weight grounding me as I shuffled to the kitchenette, floorboards groaning under each step, a low, mournful chorus that rippled through the empty space. The air smelled stale, beer, ramen grease, and something sourer, a faint rot that clung to the walls, and I grabbed a mug from the counter, chipped and stained, filling it with tap water, the faucet sputtering a cold metallic stream that splashed loud, the taste flat and bitter as I gulped it down, a faint rust tang coating my tongue. The apartment was alive with silence. Boston's hum muted beyond the window, the wind as low, insistent whine that slipped through the cracks, rattling the panes with a clatter that burrowed into my skull, carrying a briny whiff of the harbor and the distant clang of a trash can tipping in the alley. The clipping trembled faintly, caught in the draft. Margaret's face, staring up, her kids' small shapes, blurred beside her, 3 in the tub, 3 in the whisper, 3 in the cold that pulsed through the room, a rhythm I couldn't escape. My phone buzzed, screen scratched, glowing 7:58 a.m. A text from Sam. "You good, man?" I typed back. "Not sure. Place is fucked." And dropped it, the plastic clattering soft, my eyes drifting to the hall. The bathroom doors swaying wider now, tiles glinting dull, the tub's shadow stretching long across the hardwood, claw feet stark and still. I couldn't sit still, restless, wired, so I stood, boots thudding loud, the floorboards creaking a protest as I paced, the living room's cracked walls flickering in the dim light from the bare bulb overhead, its chain swaying, clinking soft, a rhythm that matched the plip, plip, plip from the sink, too steady, too alive. The whisper came, sudden, sharp. 3, louder than before, layered and breathy, curling from the hall like smoke. A chorus of voices overlapping, each tone off-key, dry and brittle, echoing off the walls with a weight that pressed my chest. My breath fogged, faint, quick, a plume in the air, though the radiator hissed steady, and the cold spot pulsed, stronger, mobile, swirling around my legs. A frigid draft that tugged at my jeans, icy tendrils brushing my ankles, my calves, climbing higher. A touch that wasn't wind, wasn't natural. I grabbed my phone, hands trembling, plastic cold and slick, and edged toward the hall. Boots, slow, deliberate. The hardwood groaning louder, the air cooling with each step. My breath fogging thicker now, swirling in the dimness like smoke caught mid-drift. The bathroom door swung wider, unbidden, the wood scraping against the frame with a low, grating whine that sank into my bones, the tiles beyond glinting wet. Though I hadn't touched the faucet, a faint sheen catching the gray light, spilling from the bedroom. I stopped at the threshold, heart thudding, a heavy thud that echoed in my ears. Phone raised, its flashlight beam cutting through the gloom, sharp, white, sweeping across the cracked tiles, their blackened grout curling up like shriveled veins, the sink's rust-stained rim, the mirror's fogged surface reflecting my face in a warped smear, pale, wild-eyed, jaw tight with dread. The tub loomed, clawfoot, cast iron, its enamel dulled to a sickly gray, scratches crisscrossing its surface like faint scars, the drain a black pit that glistened wet, beads of water trembling at its edge, rolling slow, without reason, defying the dry air. I stepped inside, tiles creaking loud, a snap that bounced off the walls, and the air plunging cold, a bite that sank into my skin, my breath fogging fast, a thick plume that danced in the beam, dissipating quick, unnatural. The whisper erupted. 3. Louder, insistent, from the tub's depths. A layered hiss that vibrated through the iron, the claw feet stark against the tiles, their shadows twitching faintly, stretching long, thin, as if alive. My stomach lurched, a cold, nauseous twist, and I aimed the beam lower, closer, the drain dripping now, a steady plip, plip, plip that matched the sink's rhythm. Water pooling faint at the tub's base, dark and still, reflecting the light in a glassy shimmer. The cold pulsed, sharper, stronger, swirling at my legs, my waist, a weight that squeezed my lungs, my breath fogging thicker, a cloud that lingered, heavy in the air. The whisper shifted. 3. Softer, closer, curling from the drain like breath against my ear, layered with a faint sob, a child's whimper, a woman's sigh, overlapping, fragmented, a chorus of grief I couldn't unhear. My phone trembled, beam jittering, the light catching the mirror now, its fogged surface streaked with droplets that streaked down like tears. And there, a shadow, tall, blurred, standing behind my reflection, its edges fraying like smoke caught in a draft, its head tilted slight, blank and featureless, arms limp but rising, slow, deliberate, reaching through the glass. My chest seized, breath short, ragged, a gasp that fogged the air, and I spun, boots slipping on the wet tiles, a sharp scrape, the beam slashing wild, the bathroom empty, sink still, tub dry again, the drain a dull black hole staring back. The whisper stopped, silence slamming down, heavy, oppressive, but the cold lingered. A weight on my skin, my neck prickling sharp, a burn that wouldn't fade. I backed out, slow, trembling, phone shaking, the hall swallowing me as I retreated to the living room, boots thudding loud, the floorboards groaning a protest that followed me back. I sank onto the couch, springs creaking, dust puffing up, a dry whiff that stung my nose, and stared at the bathroom door, ajar still, swaying faintly, its hinges clinking soft. The plip, plip, plip from the sink, a steady pulse that wouldn't let me settle. The day dragged, light fading to a bruised dusk, the alley window rattling harder as the wind picked up, a low howl that seeped into the walls, clawing at my nerves. I tried to eat ramen again, grease popping on the stove, steam fogging the air, but my hands shook, the noodles slipping from the fork, the broth cold by the time I gave up, the bowl clinking loud as I dumped it in the sink, water splashing against the rust stains, the drip resuming, plip, 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 a rhythm that matched the thudding in my skull. The whisper came again, faint, distant. 3, curling from the hall, layered and breathy, a call that tightened my chest, my breath fogging faint in the dimness, though the radiator hissed steady behind me, its warmth a lie against the cold sinking deeper. I stood, restless, pacing, the hardwood creaking loud, my shadow stretching long across the walls, flickering in the bare bulb's glow, its chain swaying, clinking soft, a rhythm that synced with the drip. The wind, the unease coiling tight in my gut. The cold spot followed, mobile now, brushing my arms, my back, a frigid touch that pulsed with a whisper. 3, louder, closer, echoing from the tub, a chorus of voices I knew now. Margaret, her kids, trapped, reaching. I grabbed my phone, fingers trembling, the plastic slick with sweat, and edged to the hall, boots slow, deliberate, the air cooling with each step, my breath fogging thicker, a plume that danced in the dimness, the bathroom door swaying wider, tiles glinting wet, the tub shadow stretching long, claw feet stark and still. I stopped, heart slamming, neck prickling, a bead of sweat trickling down my spine, cold against my shirt, and raised the phone, its flashlight beam trembling sharp white, cutting through the gloom, the tub staring back, empty, dry, but alive, its drain dripping, slow, plip, 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 water, pooling, faint, dark, and still, reflecting the light in a glassy shimmer. The whisper erupted. 3, loud, layered, a sob and a sigh and a scream, curling from the drain, the cold pulsing sharp, my breath fogging thick, a cloud that lingered, heavy in the air, and the mirror fogged, droplets streaking down, a shadow flickering, tall, blurred, reaching, its blank face tilted sharp, a presence I couldn't deny, a touch I couldn't outrun. Thursday morning didn't so much dawn as ooze into apartment 3B, a sluggish, suffocating gray that pressed through the alley window's warped glass, the light thick and heavy, like fog rolling off the harbor, laced with something rancid, the tub's whisper. 3, hadn't stopped since last night. No longer a murmur, but a layered shout, a chorus of Margaret Cole and her drowned kids clawing through the dark, their voices splintered and raw, bouncing off the bathroom's cracked tiles and sinking into my skull, a relentless drumbeat that drowned out the plip, plip, plip of the sink, the wind's whine, even my own ragged breathing. My eyes were bloodshot pits, dry, burning, each blink a scrape of sandpaper across my vision. My neck, a live wire, prickling, sharp, and constant. A burn that flared every time I turned toward the hall, where the bathroom door hung wide now, unlatched and still, its hinges silent for the first time, as if waiting. I didn't bother with the mattress, hadn't lain on it since the shadows started flickering in the mirror yesterday, tall and blurred, reaching through the fogged glass. My boots were still on, laces loose, leather damp, with sweat and pacing. my feet numb against the hardwood, the floorboards creaking faint under my weight, a groan swallowed by the apartment's oppressive hush. The kitchenette reeked, stale beer, grease, a sour rot that clung to the air like damp rot. And I gripped the counter, chipped formica cutting into my palms, the cold biting deep as I stared at the newspaper clipping still splayed there. Margaret's grainy face staring back, her kids' small shapes tangled beside her. 3 in the tub, 3 in the scream that wouldn't stop, 3 in the cold that pulsed through the room. A living thing now, wrapping my bones in ice. The apartment wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to them. Boston's hum was gone beyond the window. Silence dead. The wind a low guttural moan that rattled the panes, carrying a briny whiff of the harbor and something fouler, a wet decay that stung my nose. My phone sat dead on the couch. Battery drained overnight. Screen black. No texts from Sam to tether me. And I didn't care. Couldn't care. Not with the tub's shout. 3. Louder now. Layered with sobs, shrieks, a woman's wail, and children's cries overlapping. A cacophony that shook the walls. Faint cracks, spiderwebbing wider in the plaster. Dust, sifting down in thin plumes that danced in the gray light. My breath fogged, thick, fast. A cloud that hung in the air, though the radiator hissed steady, its warmth a lie against the cold that sank deeper. A weight that squeezed my lungs, my chest, my skull. I stumbled to the hall, boots dragging, the hardwood groaning loud, the air plunging cold, a bite that numbed my skin, my breath fogging thicker, swirling in the dimness like smoke caught mid-drift. The bathroom door gaped, tiles glinting wet, a sheen that spread across the floor, water pooling faint at the threshold, dark and still, creeping toward my boots. I stopped, heart slamming, a frantic thud that echoed in my ears, hands trembling as I raised them, empty, no phone to light the way, the gray spilling from the bedroom, barely cutting the gloom. The tub loomed, clawfoot, cast iron, its enamel slick with water now, overflowing slow, a steady trickle that splashed against the tiles, plip, 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 a rhythm that matched the shout. 3, screaming from the drain, the claw feet stark and trembling, vibrating faint as if alive. The cold erupted, sharp, violent, swirling up my legs, my waist, my throat, a frigid hand that choked my breath, my fog gasps, lingering heavy, a cloud that wouldn't fade. The tub's water surged, dark, murky, rising fast, bubbling up from the drain, a thick, gurgling rush that splashed over the rim, flooding the tiles, soaking my boots, icy and slick, a weight that dragged my steps as I edged closer, drawn despite the panic clawing my gut. The shout shifted. 3. A scream now, layered and raw. Margaret's voice breaking through. Why? 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 Her kids' cries splintering beneath, a chorus of grief and rage that vibrated through the iron, the walls, my bones, shaking the mirror above the sink, its fogged surface streaking with water, droplets racing down like tears. I reached the tub, boots slipping, a sharp scrape, the water ankle deep now, cold and dark, lapping at my jeans, a stench rising from it, wet rot, blood, a coppery tang that coated my throat, gagging me as I gripped the tub's edge, its metal biting into my palm slick with slime that clung to my skin. The surface rippled, slow, deliberate, and there, a shape, small, blurred, breaking through the water, a child's face, pale and slack, eyes black pits, staring up, mouth open in a silent scream, hair plastered wet, floating like weeds. My stomach lurched, a cold, nauseous twist. I stumbled back, boots splashing, water surging, and another shape rose, taller. Margaret's face, her skin gray and bloated, eyes hollow, lips parted in a wail that matched the shout. 3. Her arms reaching, slow, deliberate, fingers skeletal and trembling, brushing the air an inch from my face. I screamed, voice raw, cracking, a sound lost, and there's the tub overflowing faster, water flooding the hall. Dark and thick, a tide that pulled at my legs, my breath fogging wild, a plume that danced and lingered, heavy in the air. The mirror shattered, glass exploding, shards raining down, glinting wet in the dimness. A child's figure flickering there, small and hunched, its blank face tilted sharp, arms reaching through the broken frame, clawing at the air, its shadow stretching long across the tiles. Merging with Margaret's, 3 shapes now, 3 voices, 3 hands grasping, cold fingers brushing my neck, my arms, my chest. A touch that burned with ice, sinking deep, pulling me down. My knees buckled, boots slipping, splashing. I hit the tiles hard, water soaking my jeans, my jacket, a frigid weight that pinned me as the shout. 3. Screamed louder, a deafening roar that shook the walls, the floor, my skull. Margaret's face, inches from mine now, her hollow eyes locked on me, her kids beside her, their small hands clawing my shirt, tearing at the denim, their touch a fire of cold that seared my skin, my lungs, my mind. I thrashed, arms flailing, boots kicking, water splashing wild, the tub's edge slamming my ribs, a sharp crack of pain that jolted my scream, my voice blending with theirs, a chorus of terror I couldn't escape, couldn't outrun. The cold tightened, choking, crushing, my vision blurring, black spots dancing, the tub's water surging higher, lapping at my waist, my chest, dark and thick, a tide that smelled of death, pulling me under. I clawed the tiles, nails scraping, breaking, dragging myself back, boots slipping, splashing, the hall a tunnel of gloom, the bedroom door a distant square of gray I couldn't reach, their hands on me still, their voices in me. 3, 3, 3, a chant that wouldn't stop, a weight that wouldn't lift. I collapsed, halfway out, water pooling around me, chest heaving, breath fogging thick, a plume that hung in the air, their shapes fading slow, sinking back into the tub, the shout softening to a whisper. 3, faint, breathy, a promise of more, a threat I couldn't bear. I lay there, shaking, soaked, the hardwood icy beneath me, the bathroom door wide, tiles glinting wet, the tub still now, water draining slow, plip, 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 a rhythm that matched my pulse, my neck prickling sharp, a burn that wouldn't fade. My mind snapped, fractured, raw. I couldn't stay, couldn't breathe, couldn't live here, not with them, not with 3. I crawled, boots dragging, hands trembling, to the living room, the couch creaking loud as I hauled myself up, dust puffing up, a dry whiff that stung my nose, my eyes locked on the front door, my only thought escape, my only need out. Their whisper. 3. Following me, still, a sound I'd never unhear, a cold I'd never shake. Thursday bled into dusk with a slow, suffocating crawl, the gray light in apartment 3B dimming to a bruised purple that seeped through the alley window's warped glass, casting long, trembling shadows across the hardwood, their edges frayed like torn cloth. I slumped on the couch, soaked, shivering, my jeans clinging cold and heavy to my legs, water dripping from the denim in a faint plip, plip, plip that pooled beneath me, dark and still, a mirror to the tub's flood that had nearly drowned me hours ago. My chest ached, ribs bruised from slamming the tub's edge, breath shallow and ragged, fogging faint in the air, though the radiator hissed steady in the corner. its warmth a hollow lie against the cold that clung to my bones, a weight that wouldn't lift. The whisper, 3, had softened since the bathroom's chaos, but it lingered, a breathy hiss curling from the hall, layered with Margaret Cole's wail and her kids' cries, a sound that gnawed at my skull, a promise they weren't done. My eyes burned, raw, bloodshot, each blink a scrape of grit that blurred the room, my neck prickling sharp, a live wire that flared every time the bathroom door creaked, still wide open, tiles glinting wet in the gloom. The tub's claw feet stark against the floor, its shadow stretching long, twitching faintly as if alive. My boots squelched, laces loose, leather sodden. My feet numb inside them, the hardwood creaking faint as I shifted, a groan swallowed by the apartment's oppressive hush. The kitchenette reeked wet rot, coppery blood, a stench that coated my throat, gagging me still. And the newspaper clipping lay crumpled on the counter, Margaret's grainy face staring up, her kids beside her, 3 in the tub, 3 in the cold, 3 in the hands that had clawed my shirt, torn my skin, left faint red welts that stung under the damp fabric. I couldn't stay, not after last night, not after their faces in the water, their fingers on me, their screams in my lungs. My phone was dead, black screen, useless, but I didn't need it, didn't need anything but out. I stood, boots dragging, splashing faint in the puddle beneath me, the floorboards groaning loud, a protest that echoed in the stillness. As I grabbed my jacket from the pile by the door, denim soaked, the zipper snagging as I tugged it on, the weight heavy against my shoulders, clinging cold to my chest. The front door waited, wood scratched, lock stiff, and I fumbled with it, fingers trembling, slick with sweat and water, the bolt clicking loud as it slid free, the door swinging open with a slow, reluctant groan, hinges squealing into the stairwell's damp, mildewed air. I stumbled out, boots thudding, the steps creaking under my weight, the narrow tunnel, peeling paint and sour rot, swallowing me, my breath fogging thick in the chill. A plume that swirled and dissipated as I descended, the briny whiff of Boston's harbor seeping through the skylight, faint and distant, a lifeline I clung to. Mrs. Delaney's door, 1A, loomed at the bottom, chipped and faded, the brass knocker glinting dull as I pounded it. 3 sharp raps, loud and desperate, the sound bouncing off the walls like a gunshot in a cave. The door creaked open, slow, grudging, her wiry frame filling the gap, gray bun tight, glasses slipping down her nose as she squinted up at me, her lips thinning to a hard line. "What now, boy?" she rasped, voice dry and cracked, her bony hand gripping the frame, nails yellowed and curling. "I'm done," I croaked, voice raw, breaking, my hands clenching at my sides, denim gritting under my palms. "Breaking the lease. Tonight. They're up there. Delaney, Margaret, the kids. I can't..." My words choked off. The whisper. 3. Echoing faint from above, a breathy hiss that followed me down, prickling my neck sharp, a burn that wouldn't fade. Her squint tightened, eyes dark behind the lenses, and she stepped back, gesturing me in with a jerk of her head, the door groaning wider, hinges squealing as I staggered inside, the air thick with mothballs and stale coffee, a faint hiss from her kettle, curling steam into the dimness. She shuffled to her chair, wood creaking, slippers scuffing the hardwood, and sank into it, pointing me to the couch, its springs groaning loud as I collapsed, dust puffing up, a dry tickle in my throat. "Told you, 3B's cursed," she muttered, voice low. eyes flicking to the ceiling as if she could hear them too. They don't leave. Never do. You want out? I'll call the landlord. Tonight. He won't fight it. Knows the place is rotten. I nodded. Fast. Frantic. My hands trembling in my lap. Water dripping from my sleeves, pooling faint on her floor. She grabbed a phone. Rotary. Ancient. Its cord tangled as she dialed. The clicks loud in the quiet. Her rasp barking orders. Carver's breaking 3B. Get it done now. The line buzzed. Static. Faint. And she hung up. Receiver clattering soft. Her eyes locking on mine. Pack your shit, boy. Go. I bolted up. Boots thudding. The couch creaking loud. Muttering. Thanks. Voice tight. And lurched back to the stairwell. The steps groaning under my weight. My breath fogging thick. The mildew smell choking my throat as I climbed. The whisper. 3. Louder now. Curling down from 3B. A layered shout that shook the walls. Faint plaster dust sifting down, stinging my eyes. I burst into the apartment. Door slamming. Lock clicking. The air plunging cold. A bite that sank into my skin. My breath fogging fast. A plume that danced in the dimness. The tub screamed. 3. Raw. Deafening. Margaret's wail and the kids' cries overlapping. A chorus that vibrated through the hardwood. The walls. My bones. The bathroom door wide. Tiles flooded. Water lapping at the hall. Dark and thick. A tide that smelled of death. I grabbed my boxes. 5. Taped shut. Stacked near the door. Their edges soggy now. Cardboard buckling as I hauled them up. Boots splashing. The weight digging into my palms. Red welts flaring under the strain. The cold pulsed. Sharp. Violent. Swirling up my legs. My waist. A frigid hand that choked my breath. My fogged gasps lingering heavy. A cloud that wouldn't fade. The tub's water surged, gurgling, bubbling, a shape breaking through. Margaret's face, gray and bloated, eyes hollow. Her kids beside her, their small hands reaching, fingers skeletal and trembling, brushing the air inches from me as I stumbled back, boxes slipping, crashing, the hardwood slick, my boots slipping, splashing, wild. I screamed, a voice raw, cracking. Leave me alone! The sound lost in theirs, the tub overflowing faster, water flooding the living room, soaking my jeans, my boots, a stench of wet rot and blood gagging me as I clawed the door open, lock jamming, then giving, dragging the boxes out one by one, boots thudding, the stairwell swallowing me, their shout. 3. Following, a roar that shook the steps, plaster raining down, dust clogging my lungs. I hauled the last box down, arms burning, ribs screaming, dumping it outside Mrs. Delaney's door, the alley air hitting me, briny and cold, a slap that cleared my head, my breath fogging thick, a plume that swirled in the streetlights, yellow below. I ran, boots pounding Hancock Street, boxes abandoned, the wind howling, rattling windows, carrying the whisper. 3. Faint now, fading. A breathy hiss that prickled my neck one last time. As I turned the corner, the building's red brick shrinking behind me. A sagging relic I'd never see again. Sam's place was a mile off. I crashed there, soaked and shaking, his couch creaking loud as I collapsed, his voice a blur. What the hell, man? My eyes locked on the ceiling, clean and uncracked. The plip, plip, plip of his sink, a normal drip. A sound that wasn't them, wasn't 3. Days later, new place. A studio across town. The lease was gone. 3B, a memory I buried in boxes I never unpacked. Their soggy edges curling in the corner. Sleep came slow, fitful, shallow. My neck prickling, faint. A shadow of the cold that wouldn't live. One night, late, quiet, I brushed my teeth. The sink, gurgling soft, and froze. A whisper. Soft. Distant. Cut off. Incomplete. Curling from the drain. A breathy hiss that fogged the mirror faint. A plume that lingered. A chill that brushed my skin. A promise they'd followed. A dread I'd never escape.